Welcome, everybody, to the Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is part one, or I shouldn't say part one. This is the first of two of our end of the year shows. That's right. We're in December. We're starting to wind down. This is our 2022 news year in review show. This is actually episode number 270, by the way. We're actually marking it down this time because I think in years past we've kind of just made it a special show. So we're counting it this time. We're counting it this year. With me tonight is Mr. DBQ Hams. DB, how are you? How's your Marvel Snap going?
It is going pretty good. How did you know that I was playing some Marvel Snap? I got lots of time to kill here, people. I'm waiting for the intro. So I just got one more round in. So no, my Marvel Snap is going just fine. I have not purchased the season pass this month, so I'm holding off. So, but no, I'm glad to be here. We got a lot of news to cover, so let's get on.
All right. And also with us tonight is Mr. Hamp. Hamp, how's it going?
I'm not in the best of moods, but we'll go. I've had lots of problems.
I think that's appropriate given the news that we'll talk about. So it seems kind of par for the course for 2022.
Yeah, I was looking at the rundown. I was like, there's a lot of doom and gloom here, but that's all right. We got some bright spots, I think, here and there. All right, so let's get started. January. We have we're going to start the year off with a bang, actually. So we had a bunch of acquisitions, or at least announcements of potential acquisitions. First up, I'm just going to run through these real quick just to get them out, and then we'll talk about them individually. So Take-Two buys Zynga, makers of Farmville. Sony potentially buying Bungie, which I believe that went through.
Yes, it did. It went through in August, I believe.
All right. And Take-Two's went through, right? Yeah. Obviously, Microsoft announced they're hoping to buy, maybe some point, Activision Blizzard. And then the New York Times buys Wordle. So, gentlemen, out of these four, which one do you want to talk about? No, but I think...
Well, I would say, I mean, I think we're going to cover Microsoft a few other times here. I think the Sony one for $3.6 billion with Bungie, I think is an interesting, it'll be interesting to see the long-term benefit to that and how much that investment pays off, and where that, at the time the conversation was around Sony's plan for live service games and whether or not by the time they get there it will be still a viable business model, as some of our other news stories tell us. But so I think that's an interesting piece. I think the interesting thing about Wordle is that's a great sell for the person who developed Wordle. And now how many other knockoff clones are there on mobile that, I think is another whole piece as well.
Yeah, I know there's a music one that my wife plays a lot. She likes that one. I think it's like Hurdle or something like that. So yeah, you're always going to see those clones come out. The Sony one, I think to me that was probably the most surprising. Even Activision Blizzard. I mean, obviously they were having their troubles, and I can kind of see like, okay, we want to sell, get out of there, have somebody else deal with all the stuff that's going on. But I think the Sony one was just kind of surprising, just because of the way Bungie kind of left Microsoft in the first place. Well, yeah, they wanted to be their own studio and be independent. Now I guess I think they talked about some clauses and stuff in going to Sony that I think they still have like ownership of their IPs, I believe, right? I read that somewhere. So it's not like, they're going to be totally, under somebody again. But obviously, yeah, I mean, Sony says, hey, I want you to work on, these like 10 live service games. I think at one point they had announced either right before or maybe right after that, where they were trying to get more live service games going. So to me, that was kind of the standout for that month, even though obviously Microsoft Blizzard, that's a huge one just because of the amount, I think, but just more of a shock value. I think the Sony buy was pretty interesting. Hamp,
what was the sequence? I thought the Microsoft deal was announced first and then the Sony deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes, it was, because at the time there was a conversation of how much was in response or was reactionary versus kind of planned business. But Sony had been acquiring some other studios last year, right? The developers, what is it? Blue Point, the ones that did the remasters of Shadow of the Colossus. They picked up Aspire, I believe, the PC porting one, and another mobile company. So,
and a couple of the new studios that had started up, right? Was that last year, or was that also this year after the Microsoft Blizzard announcement?
I think they had picked up like the Returnal studio last year.
Yeah, they picked up Housemarque. Yeah, I'm trying to remember when they picked up Jade Raymond Studio and the former Destiny guys who also started a first-person shooter studio, but I think that might have been this year because a lot. They
did pick up a couple smaller ones as the year went on. Yes, you are correct.
Well, let me make a disclaimer. My correctness, I may be wrong too, because now I'm thinking there was a lot in response to Microsoft picking up Bethesda last year. I think Bungie was the only one in kind of response to the Activision one. We need a big bingo card for all these acquisitions going on. That is for sure.
Yeah, hopefully it slows down a little bit. Just get the games out. Now that you got all those studios, let's not keep buying stuff up. But I'm sure we'll see a little bit more of that maybe this coming year. So let's jump into February. February, I think, was a little light when I was kind of looking through the news, back through our news stories. So a couple quick hits right here. We have the sunsetting of the Bethesda launcher. So their PC, it was one less launcher that we had to worry about going through all these different launchers, Blizzard and Steam, Epic Games. So that's at least one less that we had to go through. And I think all of those were migrating toward Steam, I believe. You can do that. And then also we had the confirmation of GTA 6 from Rockstar finally, that they were actually actively developing it. So,
and then later in the year, we get the leak of GTA 6 as well, or at least 60 minutes of video that leaked online.
Yeah. Which was unfortunate for them. But, I mean, I think that was kind of surprising too. It's like, out of all the studios, like that big GTA, leak like that. But like I said, happens. So you just never know what's going to happen. Any other comments on those?
Well, this was on the heels of the GTA 5 remaster debacle, right? So, I mean, that lava barely had time to cool. And then
you're thinking of the GTA 3 remaster, right? The trilogy remaster, where everything was kind of came out and was, not in a great shape in terms of a port. Yes.
Yeah. Not very well done. All right.
So I think, I feel like that story, like, kind of shapes a lot of the discussion of current generation consoles, right? Is that it's been such a bulk of remasters and remakes, and we have yet again another, up until this point, we had yet another. Well, it's funny, you corrected me that it wasn't, that I was thinking about the GTA, whatever. What is it 3, 4, and...
3, 4.
The remaster was GTA 3, Vice City, and San Andreas.
Okay. So we had that remaster, but we've also had a GTA 5, right?
The current gen version, with upscaled, and GTA Online with assets for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X. Correct.
Yeah, so we're now in the third generation of GTA 5, right? And that's
next year. It's 10 years old,
and that's and people have been wailing and gnashing of teeth about that, but also we still have cross-gen titles, and I mean it's just super thematic that there's a lot of an argument to be made that next gen is here, but next gen is not really here. So I feel like this was kind of a nice icebreaker that maybe the next generation is actually about to get started. But of course, who knows how far out GTA 6 is, right? That's the other problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think another thing too they mentioned in the articles is this will be the first modern GTA after the departure of Dan Houser. So I'm sure they want to take as much time as they want and get everything correct. Otherwise, we'll get all those internet trolls with, let's see, they can't do anything without, the founders. But I'm sure they'll be fine because obviously it's not like they were or he was the only person working on the game itself. So, but yeah, it'll be. I mean, I guess I don't know if you guys saw the leak stuff, but just to see, like, I mean, it looked pretty good from what I saw. Like, I mean, I could see maybe it coming out like sometime, maybe the end of next year, maybe early 2024. But I mean, you never know because they could take like another 2-3 years to get the game out. So it'll be interesting. All right, so let's jump into March. We got a little more GTA news actually. But first, we have the official cancellation of E3 for this year, along with the announcement of the return of IGN's Summer of Gaming, which is basically their E3, just kind of more, I won't say indie, but there's some kind of more smaller games, I think, in those announcements during the IGN Summer of Gaming. So then we also have 2 subscription services, excuse me. We had GTA Plus, which is for their GTA Online, just giving you perks and money and shark cards and all this cars and stuff like that you get month to month. And then also PlayStation's kind of rebranding, I guess, of their PlayStation Plus and PlayStation Now kind of coming together. And I don't think in that announcement they didn't announce like the pricing. I think they were just kind of, or maybe they did. I'm looking through the article. For some reason, I thought maybe there was an earlier.
Yeah, they had announced that it was coming, and they hadn't necessarily done pricing yet. But I think this was pricing, or pricing came right as it was coming out in the summertime. But yes, this was. I forgot that GTA Plus was a thing.
I know. I haven't really heard anything of it more.
Well, I mean, I'm not in that community, so I'm sure in that that Reddit, that subreddit for GTA Online, I'm sure there's plenty of people on both sides of it, just like there are on the PlayStation Plus model. And it was a good deal over the Thanksgiving holiday in terms of a sale. I think the piece that I've been, and I haven't subscribed to it yet, other than the baseline, but it doesn't seem like they're pushing new stuff through, or they haven't really. If this was going to be a place to grab old stuff, I don't know that they've added things at the clip that people first expected. And so that there's still a lot of untapped potential there, I think, with the premium and the extended.
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys if you had upgraded at all, other than just like, because the service at the time, they just kind of rolled into whatever the lowest tier was, right? Yeah. So I didn't know if Hamp, I don't know if you resubscribed to PlayStation at all. I know you're kind of going back and forth to consoles this past year, but
yeah. So this was, I'm trying to remember. I mean, so sometime between here and the summer, I reacquired consoles, and I did sign up for. So even though I cancel my subscriptions, they never really cancel until they expire, right? So my PS Plus was still actually active. I did activate. I did actually re-up. I went to PlayStation Plus Premium, and I had an enjoyable time with the service. But as we've gone into the fall, and I've kind of looked at how I play games and buy games, I've just canceled both this and Game Pass because the way it is I mean the smorgasbord of games that are available. I don't necessarily eat from the all-you-can-eat menu all the time, and the things that I go in and like develop, kind of laser-targeted guidance about, I wind up buying. So I'm like, the reality is, if I'm really interested in something, I'm going to buy it, and I don't need the appetizers and sample menu. So, the thing that's super funny. So angry is so I canceled these things, and then I got an alert like within the last couple of days. There's like PayPal, you have authorized expenditure to Microsoft for $9.99, and I was like, what? I was like, I canceled Game Pass, and then I was reminded. I was like, oh, I'm still paying for Xbox Live. I'm like, and that's kind of really where they get you. It's like you can either pay $10 for Xbox Live, or you could just add $5 extra and get Game Pass Ultimate. But I'm kind of back to where I was, in the years before like Game Pass was out for 2 years before I ever went in, and I'm doing that now under those same auspices, right? Where I was like, I don't need to be, even though it's not that much, I just don't need to be paying for an all-you-can-eat menu of yet again more stuff that's going to cause me anxiety because I'm not using it. So, and I mean, I know that sounds like a personal commentary, but I think the point of it is I think everyone this year, particularly across the gaming market, has struggled, right, with this concept of what exactly am I going to do about these subscriptions? We didn't. Did we know? I think we must have known at this point. We didn't. I'm surprised we didn't know about the cancellations at this point. Didn't we know about the cancellations by March?
Cancellation.
Starfield and Redfall.
That's coming up.
That's coming up.
All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to early. So at this
That's
point
a
in
good
March,
transition.
at this point in March, right? You thought you were paying, right, in the anticipation of some things, and I'm sure I'm not the only person who's agonized, right, and tortured themselves over, is this the right thing to do for me, based on the production pipeline and what else is going on.
You played Stray through Premium, correct? And I think has there been anything else?
I bought Stray.
You bought Stray? Okay.
Yeah. And in fact, I didn't even play Stray on PlayStation. I played Stray on PC. Yeah, the other thing I'll mention in this month is I added in the IGN Summer of Gaming. We talked to the pre-show. A lot of my things that I dropped in here were thematic. It wasn't just the IG, right? It's the fact that like right around this time, as soon as E3 the ESRA or whatever announced that, or ESA announced that it was canceling E3. Like everybody kind of piled on and kicked it in the ribs and like stuck a fork in it because like Keighley said, oh well, I'm doing my show again, and IGN said I'm doing my show again, and then whatever, I forget what the organization is that does like all the indies and like a lot of the kind of cozy games, like, so there's just this summer festapalooza of announcements that basically everybody was floating into the space to replace E3. So, and it was kind of the start of the ramp up of anticipation of the summer, right? We'd gotten some good games to that point. We'd gotten Elden Ring. We had gotten Horizon Forbidden West. But people were definitely wondering, what was coming down the pike. And this was about the start. This was the starter pistol, right? That kind of fired that said, and Xbox announced that it shortly hereafter that it was doing its thing in June. So yeah, it was an interesting month.
Yeah. Just going back to those subscription services. You're talking about how we're all people have to like evaluate like how they're gonna if they want to sign up for these services. I think this year that kind of the Games Pass kind of saved me because there was just like nothing that I was really looking forward to, like at least as far as like big games, and I found a lot of smaller stuff that I was able to play, especially at the first half of the year. Later on, that we got all the kind of late summer, fall, winter games that, obviously they're going to come out, but it kind of held me over until, those started coming out. So it's kind of nice.
We should also mention here that, it wasn't just that this announcement dropped, it's that the announcement was super controversial, right? Because it was, first of all, it was so my Sony favorite. It was a lot of muddled, mealy mouth, side of the mouth, like weird messaging. And people were like, what is this? Why is this structured this way? You have the things that are named one thing in some regions, but it's a different plan in other regions. So people were confused.
Forgot about that. There was another whole tier in there because of the streaming aspect. Yep.
Yeah. So, and then it was the thing that really set people off, with controversy, which was, the notion of paying for demos. And I don't know if it was actually exactly this month, but as a follow on to this, there was the topic of, devs, you're going to do demos whether you want to or not. Right. So, now at the end of the day, my personal feeling on that stuff is, Game Pass may not necessarily say that you're paying for demos, but that's essentially how I use the service. If you guys remember, that was one of the ways that I justified and rationalized like paying for it, because I had been burnt by games that I had bought and hadn't been able to return. And I was like, fine, I'll just pay $15 so I can test drive them, right, and not pay for things that are broken. It was a big buzzy storm around this time period of both PlayStation fans and Xbox fans who were, casting questions, right, and doubts upon, what were you paying for, and why, and what's it justified?
Yes, definitely. So let's jump into April now, where we start off with another acquisition. The Embracer Group buys Beamdog, and this is makers of Myth Force and Baldur's Gate Enhanced. I guess they're they're a subsidiary of Saber Interactive, right? So I totally forgot about Myth Force. Did that actually ever officially come out? Because I know that was just like kind of.
No, it's still in early access. It's on Epic. I haven't checked in on it since probably the summertime with their roadmap. They had done a few other levels of things, but I think it hasn't really gone on sale on Epic. So I'm curious to see if it's still. It was pretty limited. I mean, I enjoyed what I played, but it was also only a few levels with an aggressive roadmap, which, as we know, doesn't always work out so well.
No, unfortunately not. And then also this month of April, we have Diablo Immortal was announced for PC. Obviously, it was a mobile game coming out early on, and then ported over to the PC. I never did actually get a chance to try it on PC. Did you ever do it?
This is one of the things. It is just the mobile client. It is. There is not any optimization. The buttons are all the same. It is the same thing, and I think it's also some of the concern about Blizzard's whatever their Warcraft Crash Royale game and how much of them just a straight up mobile client that will be as well.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I never did get a chance to try it on PC. And then also we have Remedy Entertainment enters an agreement with Rockstar Games for a new Max Payne 1 and 2 project. So just like a remaster, I believe, is basically what they were going to do. I don't think I heard any more info on that.
I think it's going to. I think it's going to be a. I don't know if it's going to be a remaster. I want to say it's going to be, or maybe I should make up a new term, or redesignable, kind of like
Final Fantasy VII.
Nah, like Resident Evil, like the Resident Evil 2, right? Where there may be some optimizations and there may be a couple tweaks right here and there. I need to go back and look. It may actually be a reboot. Not a reboot is an entirely new game, but I think there's going to be some significant degrees of latitude taken with. Like, I don't know if you're going to get the comic book presentation, and I want to say there were mentions of like looking at like the Max Payne 3 kind of engine and how that game kind of changed the thing. I'll have to go back and look at it. Regardless, this article. And I did say this 3 times. This was my favorite news story of the year, right? I mean, Max Payne 1 being my favorite video game of all time. The notion that it's going to get redone, remastered, and put on modern hardware was the most exciting news to me, personally, throughout the year.
Yeah, at the beginning of the article, it just says they will remake both of the games. So, I mean, they don't really go into any more detail. As far as I can tell, like, this little quick hit here. There's not much in the article itself. So
yeah, I think in my head I'm calling it's something definitely more than a remaster, but not quite a full reboot.
Yeah. Is it more that they're gonna? Are they just gonna build it from like the ground up? But it's basically just using today's hardware, basically, today's software and stuff.
Yeah, but I want to say I thought I saw something about them maybe putting it more so in that Max Payne 3 kind of motif. So I think it will be the same story, but it's going to be built on new technology, and the presentation format may be slightly different.
Okay. Makes sense. All right, let's jump into May. Actually, we got some meaty months here coming up here. We got Embracer, once again, buys Eidos Montreal and Crystal Dynamics. So that, I think that was kind of another bit of a surprise, at least for me, just because, I mean, granted, Tomb Raider and kind of was always I don't know, kind of a black sheep, I guess, for Square, or at least according to them, because it didn't meet their numbers. And obviously the Avengers wasn't like a super big hit like they would have liked. So so it was kind of, but it was still kind of a surprise. Like they let go of all these franchises. I mean, you have Deus Ex and Thief also in that same portfolio. So just a little bit more of a surprise for me. Not that I was a huge fan. I don't think I really played. I think I only played the very first Deus Ex. I never played any of the remaster, or not the remaster, but the newer games. And Thief, I was never really a big fan of. But I also have Legacy of Kain, which I know everybody's like, raising pitchforks and torches because they want a new game out of that series. But we'll have to see how, what happens when it comes up and with Embracer. Anything like surprise you here, or any comments?
I mean, Embracer over the course of the year, I think is a really big story in terms of what they've picked up, whether it's this, whether it's Beamdog, whether it's how they've merged Volition and Gearbox, whether it's, as we'll talk about in a little bit, all right, all their Lord of the Rings pieces, like how much, what comes of that, I think is really going to be an interesting question. And what's the appetite for the investor and the wealthy investor of Embracer, who we know and who has been out there in terms of kind of a game collector historian, where the business model to this is, and how much of this is a hobby project to see what he can spin off.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see like how if all these companies, like obviously like when you see like Microsoft and Sony buying these companies, they kind of keep them as is. But some of these other groups kind of, when they do that, they like start merging them, and I think we already saw that a little bit. I don't know, I don't remember if we had it on here, but with Volition kind of getting absorbed into Gearbox, I believe. I don't remember if I put that story in here.
Yeah,
that happened at the end of the year. Yep.
Yeah.
I think the big thing for me is, I mean, the Embracer acquisition model and really the Embracer umbrella model, right? The parentage model is kind of different, right? For these than, I mean, Microsoft and Sony bring them in and make them part of their kind of unified portfolio management and production pipeline. And I feel like show a little bit more motherhood and apple pie than what goes on with Embracer. And that's even right with the very, very hands-off, standoffish management style of Microsoft Studios. Embracer, I think I've said it a couple times before in my head, what Embracer is becoming and what they are is they are a publisher's clearinghouse, right? For dev studios. From what I've read and what I've seen, there's not the same type of overhead corporate kind of infrastructure and fabric. It's not like they're paying for real estate for commercial offices for every single one of those studios. It's not like, I mean, they have benefits, but the feeling I get is that they are benefits more like in the contracting world, right? You will have companies that you join and you're a full-time employee, but then you will have contractors, and those contractors, in general, they don't have native benefits from their staffing agencies, but the staffing agencies always provide hey, you can take some of your pay and buy like these benefit packages, right? So it's they wind up being paid maybe more money than they normally would for a salary, but there's not kind of the homogenized, commoditized type of benefits package that are kind of bought wholesale for a big group of employees. So I feel like that's like a thing that also goes on with these studios, right? Like it's not like you join Embracer and you get some big benefits package. It's your studio joins Embracer, and that allows your studio to buy a benefits package at a discount, basically, right? Cheaper than you would if you were your own standalone company. But it's not that type of kind of organic like structure that you have, because Embracer is not that highly capitalized, right? And they're certainly not carrying as much cash and as much money as a Microsoft or a Sony, in fact, right? But they but they own like 10 times as many studios. So they're clearly doing something different with like how those things are normally done, right, in a large corporation.
Yeah, kind of more like maybe like an investment firm, just buying, you know, trying to. Although I think in this case, you know, I don't think they'll, like, usually when that happens, it's like they're trying to like turn around a corporation, and then maybe like 4 or 5 years or so, you know, then they're going to sell it off. I think this is a little bit different in this case, but you know, still similar in same regards.
They might just be like the what do we, I forget what the term is. What do you call the people who buy like the fixer upper houses and just
the flippers?
Yeah. They might just be a studio flipper. Right.
Could be a new business model, maybe. All right. Up next, instead of buying stuff, we got a couple of companies here that are parting ways. So we got EA and FIFA are splitting up. And once that happens, I think they're still going to do one more game, I believe, next year. Oh no, they're not. This was the last.
This was the last FIFA licensed one. Correct.
Okay, because I know they're going, or at least on the EA side, they're going to do the EA Sports FC. So they're going to rebrand their soccer title. So kind of like another, like, oh, okay, because it's kind of, you know, they've been in. How long have they been together? Like, it seems like forever, actually, FIFA and EA. So I don't know if it mentions this here in this article, but I know it's been, like, as far as I can remember, like, even, you know, back in the, you know, like 16-bit days that, you know, they were together. So just kind of another, I guess they just wanted to do their own thing. So and then up next we have Raven Software forms their QA union. I think kind of the year of the unions of this year, but especially in the kind of the latter half of the year, where we saw like Activision also, or I guess it's part of Activision, but more Activision studios forming unions. So, any comments on that one? Okay, I don't know if I put that in there, or did you put that one in there?
I didn't put it in there. The only thing I would mention is just as we go through these, just a reminder on. An educational point, you know, in the social media dialogue, a lot of people are running around with the Activision is unionizing, and the Microsoft acquisition is going to, you know, enable those thousands of employees to, right? No, it's the entire organization. I've talked a lot about the stratification of the workforce, right? What's been unionized, you know, not only here at Activision but also at Microsoft, right? Microsoft has had its own unionization effort, which, contrary to past history, which I think is another thing that people often forget, Microsoft did not do anything or say anything that would encourage people to not unionize. So they've never been union busters, but they have definitely not shown a great degree of interest or support in unionization. And so Microsoft has, you know, recently unionized a body of QA testers at Bethesda. That's 300 people. The people here at Raven Software is about 28 people in Wisconsin. And you know, I don't remember if we put it in the rundown, but you know, the later effort to unionize out of Albany is 14 people. Right, so that's 42 people out of a employee size of, I want to say there's like 12,000 employees at Activision. So it's not a huge sample size.
No, and I think, I mean, part of the story is that they're small parts of larger studios. That I think the other piece of this, and one of the reasons I put it in here, is in part it ties into Microsoft and trying to keep their head down and controversy down as they try to move things through regulatory approvals. But this is also the same studio that before the buyout in the beginning of the year, that last year in 2021, there was a lot of layoffs talks, that this was, you know, this is following up on groundwork that had been kind of building and laid down. Again, I don't know that this is necessarily the wave of unions within the video game industry. I think it does show some response to some of the most kind of tangentially employed in the QA testers, the people that are brought in and let go on a frequent basis. And you know, I think that piece in and of itself is it is not a bad sign if you are in support of those types of organizations, but at the same time, it is not suddenly a tide shift within the industry.
Yeah, and I'll also add on to that. I think I've mentioned that, what I talked about before to a few people, and I've been met with doubt. Just remember that as each of these votes have ramped up, right, and been about to happen, what Activision has tried to do is they've tried to get the vote expanded to all employees at the site, right, which they doggone well know will result in the employees not voting to unionize, because you're going to have a ton of people who are at six-figure salaries, right, who will vote no, because highly paid people are not necessarily benefited from unionizing, right? It puts a cap on, how much their earning potential is. It removes things like them being able to get, bonuses, incentive pay, be placed on, right, certain incentive pay types of certain bonus programs, right, where there's more of kind of revenue share and based on performance of the company and things like that. So, Activision knows what they're doing. There's a reason, that they've been pushing to expand it at those sites, and there's a reason expand the vote at those sites, and there's a reason why the QA testers and their legal advocates pushed to not have that happen, right? So that you could have kind of atomic units at these sites vote positively and gain unionization because they're at the lower end of the pay scale.
All right. Let's jump on to the next article here. Hamp, you mentioned Max Payne 1 and 2 was your kind of announcement of the year. This one hurt my soul. This was Redfall and Starfield being delayed until 2023. First half 2023. Supposedly, we'll see.
Well, and at the time this was announced, we did not know it was first half of 2023.
Well, yeah. This was later on. They mentioned it should be the first half. So this is just like a Twitter post they threw out there. Obviously later on had on their website and all that. But yeah, this one was that Starfield more so than Redfall. Even though Redfall kind of got me going later on with more gameplay that they showed off, it looked more interesting than I thought it was going to be. But Starfield was Bethesda Game Studios, their next big title after Fallout. Well, I guess 76, I suppose, was their next big, the last game that they did. But this was the big space epic, and we learned later on that it's basically kind of a mishmash of like an in space Elder Scrolls and No Man's Sky. You've got all these planets you can go to, and there's should be hopefully a good storyline that kind of runs through everything when you're playing the game. So, but yeah, that was my least favorite news announcement of this past year. But I mean, hopefully,
it hurt my soul too. Right, being a guy who kept his head stuck in Star Citizen, for a very long time, much longer than I should have, just because I was in love with the dream and the ideal, right, of space exploration and having tons of planets. Like this was going to be the thing that was going to be the nearest to that experience, right? And it was the first juncture in the year that kind of knocked me off my pedestal of Game Pass. Even though I went back and re-upped later, it was the concepts that I formulated then about questioning whether or not I needed to be in that subscription service, have proven out as the year has gone on, and is part of the reason why I'm off it again. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah, unfortunate. But like I said, hopefully they'll they get everything going next year. Next year. Get a lot of games next year, potentially. We'll see if anything else gets delayed even further, even to the end of the year, and not just these two games, but all the games that have been delayed this year. But we'll have to see how that pans out. All right, up next, we have good news. PC gaming prices might stop being a hellscape soon. I think, Camp, did you add this one?
Yeah, and I won't go into detail. This is a thematic story. So this was, the story bleeding into this year for PC part buyers was that like ridiculously high prices and GPUs being in short supply and being incredibly expensive. I had stopped building, this, at the beginning of the year. One of the, I had gone to this strategy of buying partially built PCs and then just dropping cards and stuff that I already had so I could at least get my CPU upgrades done. But kind of as we entered this part of the year is when we started seeing prices falling out. And actually this specific month, so the month before this, I had started changing out my Radeon cards because I was running into tons of driver problems with those AMD cards. And I was able to do that because prices dropped out of GPUs finally. And actually specifically this month, prices dropped so much that I was able to, finally upgrade to a 3080 Ti, whereas I historically have never bought the 80 series tier card. But prices came down and made it more reasonable, and I started building again in this time frame of the year. So, that's I just put it in there because it was kind of a line of demarcation, right, where it was okay to start getting back in the water for PC builders again about this time of the month, and hopefully that will continue. Although there's lots of complaints about the price costs of new GPUs, and we still have a chip shortage, which is why NVIDIA has only revealed the 4090. But we're starting to see the 4080s go ahead and roll out, and we're starting to hear news of the 4070s being on their way as we turn the corner into the next year. And supposedly the new Radeons are competitive. So hopefully we've got more good times ahead.
Yeah, I think AMD had their announcements not too long after the 40 series, right? Or the 4000 series was announced. Yeah. So we'll have to see how that turns out. Excuse me. All right, let's jump into June, halfway through the year. I think about halfway through the episode, so that's perfect. We got some more Diablo Immortal news. So just kind of a breakdown of their first couple weeks on their kind of how much was spent. So we had about 24 million in spending within the first 14 days after launch. The US was about 43% of that, and then South Korea was around 26. It was 26 in the title, but it says 23 later on in the article. So I don't know how that breaks down. And then Japan, Germany, and Canada kind of made up the rest of that whole total. So I guess, it did fairly well, as much, malign that this title got, or, all the crap that it got when it was first announced. So whether it's, it deserves it or not, the spending's there. So I'd be interested to see how the rest of the year turned out. If that kept up. I haven't really seen anything else come up about that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting story there, right? This was successful because of the profile of it and because of how they hooked whales to some degree, right? I was fine throwing $7 into it, but at the same time, you started to see shortly thereafter the amount of money that it took to really scale up in here. And so I would be curious to see what that player base still looks like and what that investment spending tail has been in terms of how much of that has been sustained and how much of that is really made on the front end. So let's keep moving through with Activision Blizzard. We get a little bit of Overwatch 2, we get an announcement, but we don't get to the news story of kind of the controversial kind of launch around it later in the year in terms of requiring a phone number and all the pieces there and some of the server problems that they had. But I'd say, gentlemen, is there anything from, as we alluded to earlier in the episode, anything from the big announcements in the non-E3 month of June? That we had lots of both studio announcements, but then all the but all the kind of cumulative shows as well.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile just to run the notables, quick sizzle reel. We got Modern Warfare 2 announced, Street Fighter 6, the Callisto Protocol, a lot of games which I will go back because it's super interesting that we haven't heard anything about since this. We got Midnight Suns, Saints Row, Gotham Knights, Last of Us. Some of these weren't necessarily brand new announcements, but were updates. The Last of Us remake. Apparently Flashback 2, which I totally forgotten about, which I don't think we've heard anything about. Warhammer 40k Darktide Metal Hellsinger, which has achieved some moderate popularity. Neon White, which I've played this year, is an excellent title. But yeah, it was the Summer Game Fest announcements were not horrible. We got some good things to look forward to out of that.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, I think we had Street Fighter also coming out of there. Street Fighter 6, new Aliens. That is, I don't know. This wasn't like wasn't a sequel to what was the other one?
Not the three, the multiplayer kind of Left 4 Dead type of Aliens. No, it was not like that. This was the sequel to Alien Isolation, I believe, right? Where the more horror-based one.
Yeah, some of the other ones, I haven't really seen too much of the other ones, so at least anything more, or if they've even come out yet. So we can jump into the next one, which would be July. Actually, to go back to Overwatch just for a second, I was kind of surprised, not so much of the release or anything, but just that it was going to be kind of replacing the very first game. So it was just like a, overhaul. Like it wasn't just going to be two games what they had announced initially. They're supposed to go side by side, but it actually does totally replace the original Overwatch. So just interesting that they eventually decided to do that, which I would have just thought they would have done anyways, but just interesting. All right, up next for July, we have a Skate announcement, new Skate that's coming out, and that it was going to be free to play. So this is coming out for pretty much everything, PlayStation, Xbox, PC. No Switch announcement, probably not, more than likely, since EA. So they don't like to release a lot on Switch. But I guess kind of not of a surprise that it's going to do. There's going to be kind of a free-to-play game. I can kind of see it going that way, just with all the different kind of customizations that you can do with the deck and all that. I'm assuming that you'd be able to do in just your character itself. So just be interesting to see when this one comes out, how it's actually going to pan out, because I don't think there's ever been any kind of like free-to-play skater game that I've seen. So let's see, what else do we have? We have Discord coming to Xbox, which was, I think, a big announcement finally. Kind of maybe not the best launch when it did finally come out. They had, I wouldn't say issues, but just kind of the way they had kind of like Nintendofied it by having you have to go through the mobile app to switch over to your console when you connect. So that was a little weird, I think, in my opinion. But I think eventually it's just a standalone app where it's going to be. I don't know if they've actually released that update to everybody yet. I know that went into the kind of the preview players at first, so I'll have to see. I don't think did you ever try DB? I didn't try it at all, even when it initially had come out on the Xbox, just to see how it was.
No, I hadn't really tried it on Xbox.
Okay.
No.
I was just wondering. I mean, most of the time I'm on PC anyways nowadays, but I was just wondering. Every once in a while, I shouldn't say every once in a while, but I will go back to my Xbox every so often, so just to see. But I wanted to kind of see how it played out, but it's all right. Up next, I think, Camp, you put this one in. The video game sales set top fall first in years as the industry braces for a recession.
Yeah, so this is another kind of thematic story, not necessarily event-driven, but, as we have crossed through the middle of the year and kind of headed into the holiday season, we started to see a culmination of the state of the economy and the state of commerce kind of on the video game market, where a lot of these companies had been riding super high right in the years of the pandemic, revenues and profits up high. And even though I routinely make the cautionary tale, lots of people run around and say record revenue, record profits, they should be raising prices. And I remind people revenue and profits as a linear quantitative amount are not representative of the financial health of a company. You have to heavily take into consideration cost of goods sold, operations margins. If it's taking me more money to make money, then that doesn't mean that I'm upside, right? That means that I'm actually sliding backwards, right? But just from a volume perspective, right, you've just had a ton of more people buying games while they were stuck at home, and now we're seeing the bottom kind of drop out of that. People are backsliding. All of tech is down, and this was about the point in the year where we started seeing quarterly earnings reports that were kind of showing that backslide, right? Which feeds into cost of consoles and, cost of games going up and, a lot of the discussion around, again, our favorite story, the Microsoft Activision merger. Did we already had one Take-Two story in here? I can't remember.
Yes, we had Take-Two with Zynga.
Yeah.
Yes, I will hold off because I think we have another one here that connects to this, and then some other things that have been going on with the Activision merger. So, but yeah, hitting the point of the year here in July where it looks like there's a downward tilt on the nose of the airplane, right, with regards to kind of how things are going financially.
Yeah, unfortunately, all around too, not just video games. So, all right, let's jump into August. We have, and this kind of going to downer territory again coming here. We got Nintendo faces harassment claims over from testers, excuse me.
Yeah, I had this one here. I think it is just in the light of all the news stories that came out in 2021 around harassment and toxic workplaces. We had over the course of the summer, we had a couple of kind of features from IGN and some other places related to the treatment of testers and kind of the division of the the main campus and the side farm at Nintendo. And so the rosiness of Nintendo, some of the shine came off a little bit there. And I think that was just a piece there that companies are still companies.
This was about the time that we got the soundbite from Reggie too, right? That he was like the Nintendo that I left is not, was better than this one, or the Nintendo of today is not representative of the company that I left X number of years ago.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yes, because he was on his book tour. Yeah.
Yeah. This was the one with they were like it was like a third or like contractors, correct? Or is that this one? Okay. I just want to know.
Yeah, it's a lot of the play testers.
Okay. All right, so we're going to jump back into some Embracer news. I think DB alluded to this earlier with Embracer Group buys Middle Earth. So they bought. Here for a second. They acquired the rights to J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and Hobbit properties. So not necessarily movies, but just kind of the IP itself, I suppose. And I don't know. They haven't really announced anything past that, right?
No, I don't think. Again, I think we kind of hit on the Embracer model and where things are at there last time.
Yeah. So yeah, just getting the rights basically to make new stories maybe of these games or of these IPs. So.
Well, I think the significant thing is it takes these out of the hands of EA, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of things kind of fell off of EA's plate there in one way or another. But
I said, who's been doing the Shadows of Mordor? Has that been EA or Warner Brothers?
That was Warner Brothers.
It's WB. Yep, WB Games.
Yeah, so I guess it takes it out of their hands too.
Yeah. All right, so let's jump into PS5. So they're announced that they're increasing prices in select markets around the world. Europe, Asia, Latin American countries, and Canada, to name a few. But so they went up about, let's see here, I'm trying to get to I forgot they didn't have what the original price was, but I think it went up maybe like around $100 or 100. Whatever
No,
that current.
I mean, I would just snap an average baseline of like 50. But again, that's super subjective based on foreign exchange rates. I think part of the controversy was people flipped out about this story. But like, first of all, some of the countries where the prices went up, those people pay less for their PlayStation 5s than we do, like significantly less. Like I think Japan, they pay like $350 in US dollar equivalent. So there's that, and the fact that, like I said, the general stories that ran around the media was that it was a $50 increase. But again, it all depends on foreign exchange rates. Like in the UK, like I think they went up by like $35. So it all depends. Prices went up, and that's unfortunate. But it was also, I don't think it was as inflammatory or sensationalist as some kind of media sites ran it with it.
And I think we did discuss it too. Like that's happened before, so it's not like it's like a first time thing. So nothing out of the ordinary, basically. But of course,
much bigger scale, I think, this time around. But in select markets, it has absolutely happened before. So removes off the table the line that a lot of people ran with, which is unprecedented. No, unprecedented means it's never happened before, and that's not the case.
All right. So from a price hike to a service that I think maybe most people weren't surprised that this was going away, but Google is getting rid of Stadia, or has gotten rid of Stadia, actually. We actually, I think, are in the midst of their refunding process.
I got my refund.
Oh, you did get your refund. Okay. I keep checking, but I haven't seen anything come through yet, but we'll see what's going on with that. So that was, like I said, for most people, it wasn't a surprise. I thought it was a little bit of a surprise. Obviously, it was kind of you can kind of see throughout the year, throughout the couple years, it was kind of coming. They're shedding studios and people leaving, and all those things that happen when a company's about to probably go away, or at least get bought out or something like that. So kind of unfortunate. I thought the technology was there. It's just maybe everything else wasn't quite there. How they did everything. So
yeah, they said they're basically recouping their investment by utilizing that technology right in YouTube and other gaming ventures. I think the most surprising part of the news here was that people were getting refunds, because that's not the Google norm, or I'd say the norm around the industry. Public service announcement. One thing you might want to check on, Tao, as well as other people, if you haven't gotten your refund, which you may have missed, is you may have missed an email, because that's would have said if the payment method that you used to purchase, if that, say it was a debit card or a credit card, if that has expired, then Google's effort to refund to that charge vehicle would have failed, and so you may have to go in and revise your numbers. I ran into that for this. I had actually ran into this a few years ago with my NVIDIA Shield when I tried to return it for repair. But yeah, check to make sure that your payment method is still that you used originally is still valid.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely have to look at that. All right, let's jump into another kind of bummer story, I think, for a lot of people. 343 cancels the local split screen co-op on Halo Infinite. That was delayed originally from the release of Halo, and then they just finally said, you know what, we can't do it. So unfortunately, but they did announce kind of the updates for the rest of the year, with the Forge coming out this year, and just like the winter update that was coming. So kind of a bummer. I think a lot of people, for some reason, they waited for they were trying to wait for this to come out so they can play with people, which is understandable. It's fun to play, especially some couch co-op. But you can you still play online, so that's still a thing. Unfortunately, it's just local co-op is not there anymore, so kind of a bummer. Hamp, were you gonna say something? Or sorry, I thought looked like your window lit up there for a second. So, but yeah, so we got, unfortunately, no more co-op for Halo. Up next, we have Disney wants new Star Wars games out every 6 months. I believe, Hamp, you put that in there.
Yeah, so this is pertinent in that it hangs on, the LucasArts announcement of, was that last year? That, they were going to be, showing some kind of parenthood on shepherding their properties, again, taking things out of EA's hands to a certain extent, at least like as far as exclusivity goes. They the only thing Star Wars fans have gotten really over the last couple of years has been Fallen Order. Everything else that has been in pipeline for Star Wars content has been canceled. Studios have been shut down. And one story we didn't put in here in the annual rundown, but I think that's pertinent to this, is that, and also this year we've had announcements of at least, 2 cancellations. The Knights of the Old Republic effort has either been canceled, radically moved back, is going to do a do-over. What's that, DBQ?
No, I forgot about that, right? Like that, the kind of rumored, like it stalled production and that it was never really as far along as projected. And that goes back into the Saber and Embracer Group aspect of things in this. Yeah.
Yep. So, maybe, hopefully, I mean, the question that surrounds this one is, are they going to be quality titles, and I mean, this is, again, like so many things like have inroads that converge back to the Microsoft Activision question, right? The Microsoft the interesting thing about here is like when you come out with these things where you're trying to have deterministic production pipeline outputs, right? Like we want a new game every 6 months. Okay, well, what does that mean when so many games get delayed? That means you probably have to have redundancies in multiple titles in progress so that one can be a makeup in case you miss. And then you start to ask questions about quality, right? Does that, is the effort to get the game out the door, or is the effort to make the best game? That formula changes when you're insistent that something be out on specific dates. Which again, I say ties to the Microsoft Activision question of, they have 23 studios now, they're going to have 38 studios. What does that mean if you're trying to get a AAA title out, once every quarter, right, to go into Game Pass, which is a production cadence that they haven't met yet, right? So.
No, the only snark I want to say here is this model of pushing things out so quickly worked so well for their movie studios and Star Wars as well. So.
Well, I mean, so with the CEO of Disney now leaving, and we have Bob Iger back in the picture, could this potentially be, kind of tweaked also with kind of like he was like, he's kind of cleaning house as far as like, pushing out so much content on Disney Plus and just Disney in general. So I don't know if that's going to filter down into games also.
I think it absolutely could. I mean, one of his big manifestos has been that he's coming back and giving things like the production schedule and cadence back to the creatives, right? So that there's more of an emphasis on, let me take the time that I need to make something quality. The thing that would be super interesting, it's super interesting that DBQ brings up the topic of the movies, right? Because in this post Return of the Jedi age, what I have become convinced of, the things that I love about Star Wars much more so are not the Skywalker bits, right? But are all the ancillary pieces, like Rogue One, just an amazing movie. The Mandalorian is great. I haven't had a chance to watch Andor, but I suspect that it's, as good as people say it is. What's super interesting about this is the stuff that we get that's off the mainstream. And so that is the one piece that would be interesting if they have this cadence. I'm hoping that what we would see is a lot more properties that don't have to do with kind of a centralized Skywalker theme, but even more so, maybe don't even necessarily have to do with a centralized Jedi theme, right? It would be great to have an opportunity to be a Corellian smuggler. It would be great to have an opportunity to be a bounty hunter or a Mandalorian. So there's interesting potential there even.
No, my old school EU fandom would tell you that the most interesting stories are the ones where they have the creative freedom and not being stuck to the main three.
Yes, definitely. And they did a quick rundown too of like what 9 titles here in this article. So we had the Star Wars Galactic Edition, Skywalker Saga Galactic Edition, which I'm assuming is just like a Game of the Year edition with all the stuff in it. Star Wars Eclipse by Quantic Dreams, Knights of the Old Republic, which we just talked about, the remake Star Wars Hunters by Zynga, which I believe was delayed also, I think, until next year. Jedi Survivor by Respawn, an untitled FPS by Respawn, untitled strategy game by Respawn, Amy Hennig's untitled game by Skydance Media, and then on the open world Ubisoft game. So we'll see if or all of those come out at some point in the future. So, all right, let's jump into October as we have the unfortunate shutdown of the G4 video game channel. Once again, I don't even think I even went back, and I used to watch it back in the day, G4, when it first had come out, but I don't think I watched any of the newer stuff. I don't know if either of you had the opportunity to go back and watch anything.
No, I think I added it in here just because it was such a short period of time. I think it really comes kind of on the heels of, the acquisitions, the shutdowns, the kind of mergers happening within the game studio aspects, and then seeing it around games journalism as well. And I think it pairs nicely with fandom acquiring Giant Bomb, GameSpot, Metacritic, which were, either previously CBS Ventures, Viacom, and then into Red Ventures. So I think it's the constricting of games press as well.
Yeah, just all around. And then up next we have, I think, a popular story for you, DP. UK review Microsoft bid to buy Activision Blizzard. So they've had their, obviously we've heard the stuff in the US actually, and recently too with the FTC. I think we'll talk about it here in a few minutes. But just, the UK regulatory group detailing proposed acquisitions of Activision Blizzard, and just, kind of like the counterpoints they're trying to make, and
yeah, right. I think that this all ties in with we've been building to this over the course of the episode of having a lot of acquisitions, but also kind of Microsoft walking a fine line between knowing that there's going to be some regulatory concerns and oversight in here, and how they end up trying to navigate that as it potentially becomes kind of the first big pushback against technology conglomeration. Good or ill, but yeah. I think we'll cover that a little bit more too.
Yep, we'll get to that in a little bit here. Up next, we're talking about the NVIDIA RTX 4000 series that was announced and coming out. So they actually announced there's two RTX 4080 models, the 12 gig and the 16 gig, and they have walked back the 12 gig RTX 4080, and they're just still coming out with the 16 gig one, but they figured that it seemed too confusing to have two of the same, at least named models. Really, the only difference was the 12 and 16. So, or I'm sure there's other stuff, but that's just they're going through on the article here. But they're not going to release that 12 gig, at least for now. I don't know if they're going to do anything in the future, or maybe rename it, or do something else with it. But that was big story, I thought, just because it was such a big to do when they announced everything these past, or I shouldn't say past, but within the past few weeks and months at that point. So
yeah, and I think it was less about it being confusing about the naming, because NVIDIA has done that before, where they've had a card with two different. It was more so the fact that the performance of the 12 gigabyte was way off because the memory bandwidth and memory bus were not as wide. They used an incredibly limited memory bus, and so I think it was more of a saving face to pull that card back with it labeled as that SKU. I readily expect that card to come back out as maybe that's what the 4070 is, or maybe that's what the 4060 will be. But yeah, it's a little bit unfortunate that the pullback was tied to the amount of memory that's on the card, because that made people feel like, oh, they're pulling it back because it has less memory. No, it's because the memory bandwidth was bad. So I'm sure that card will resurface. I'm sure NVIDIA will figure out a way to repurpose it.
Yeah. All right. And then last for October, we have Twitter's best source for gaming news calls it quits. And I think you put that one up there, Hip, I believe.
I did. Another kind of thematic story. I'm not personally, I want to be careful. Nibel or Nibelian or whatever, definitely did a service to people on Twitter who don't keep up with gaming news. And so it was great for people who, don't have 20-something bookmarks in their browser for gaming news like we do. And so for a certain demographic, that was great. I didn't follow that account because that account tweeted everything about gaming news, whether it was corroborated or correct or not. Much of it was not news, but was just some quite honestly, trash piece of analytical mess, right, from some website. But, it filled a space. And so I put it here because it's thematic of not necessarily, Nibo leaving, but more so the fact that Elon Musk buying Twitter, right, actually had a knock-on effect to gaming, right? Because gamer Twitter is a social media destination, right, for a small percentage of the gaming market. And that landscape, right, is changing, right, due to kind of what Musk is doing. Who I think, as we were doing the podcast, right, there's breaking news that he's just completely disbanded the Safety and Privacy Council for Twitter, so which had already been stripped, right, to bare bones by layoffs. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how this plays out, right? And also about this time is when we started hearing about the people who supposedly were going to mass exodus and defect to Mastodon and Hive and things of that nature. And I think those were lofty prognostications by people who didn't really understand like what Mastodon is and what Hive is from a staffing perspective. So again, it'll just be kind of interesting to see how it unfolds over the next year.
Yeah, I'd actually never heard of this Twitter account for being like the best source of stuff. So I guess you'd really have to be in there.
That's because we grew up as the industry did, following a variety of sites. Yeah.
Yeah. Not to say that, for good or bad, I just never heard of it before. So, just for the record, Hamp, I only have 10 bookmarks for gaming news sites. No, I'm sure I have a lot more than that. I bounce around a lot, actually. But anyways, let's jump into November as we wind down the year here. We have the Sonic creator, and I'm probably going to butcher this, Yuji Naka, arrested for insider trading. First time. Because there isn't, I don't think I put it in here.
He was charged with it later in December then, right? Like he
okay.
was, yep. Again, not being charged and found guilty are two different things.
Right.
But he was part of a Square investment piece, a few other people that purchased stock around mobile division when there was an announcement coming.
It's unfortunate. I think, wasn't he arrested again, though, not too long ago for a different, I thought it was for something else, though. Still insider trading, but for like a different game.
I'm double checking. I think he was arrested. I think it's on 2 different counts of insider trading. But I will. Yeah. So it says here on Game Informer, reportedly arrested again for another insider trading scheme. So
that's what I thought I saw. All right. So from one possible wrongdoing to another, we have the Superman Unreal Engine 5 demo stolen, as it were, and sold on Steam. I actually reported on this a couple months ago in November. Actually, I put this one out there. It was just an interesting story, just kind of reading the article from Eurogamer.net, and this gentleman, making a demo from the Matrix Awakens kind of sandbox, kind of like just play area, basically.
Yeah, it was an Unreal 5 sandbox that came out with Matrix last December.
Yeah, so this gentleman from Torbex Games created a Superman, but I mean, obviously it's just enough to not actually be Superman in the game. Demo, you just basically just flying around the city. I don't think you can really do anything else other than to fly around. But it ended up on Steam for $11 US dollars, and him kind of going through and finally getting it taken down after weeks or maybe like a month or so of trying to get petitioning to get this taken off. So I thought it was an interesting article that, like, in this day and age, it's just kind of like nothing safe, like even just some demo you put out there and someone's could just rip it off and throw it on Steam, or it could be anywhere really. I mean, there's plenty of stores out there that you can put something like this out there. So just an interesting article. And then we come back to Take-Two, Hamp, I believe is what you're alluding to, not too long ago, for their forecasts, their slumps as forecast cut deepens the video game industry gloom.
Yeah, so yet again, another kind of thematic story, not necessarily specific to this time, but one of the other reasons I put it in here is Strauss also did an interview, I want to say earlier that month on The Wrap, right, where he talked a lot about, again, our favorite story, a lot about the dynamics and the reasons, the financial reasons behind the Microsoft Activision merger, and just kind of how Take-Two looked at them and why Take-Two didn't really consider itself on the block for sale, which again could point to, things about, why or why not maybe Ubisoft, has positioned itself the way it has and what's going on with EA. One of the other things I realized from that interview is I've kind of slept on Strauss. I think he is one of the most financially savvy CEOs in the gaming industry that I've seen. I'm super impressed by his views on finance in the industry and just kind of how he's looking at managing the portfolio of Take-Two. But again, kind of like I talked about before, this is the kind of bellwether that, of the noise tipping downward on the airplane, right, about like a lot of these companies. And one of the specific things he mentioned in The Wrap, and this is why it's going to be interesting, I think you made a mention earlier in the show about kind of consolidation and expecting it to slow down. I don't. I think I've mentioned on the show before, I definitely have a hypothesis that we're going to see more and we're going to start accelerating towards mass consolidation that's kind of centric around the platform owners because, gaming companies are thinly capitalized and it becomes super difficult and super risky to run an organization moving as much cash in and out as something like an Activision around something like Call of Duty, and then to have a thin capital base, right? Because you can't ride through a bad year, and that a bad year will cause you to topple over, right, and point downward in a direction that it may be impossible to recover, right, once you start gaining momentum in a downward direction.
Right, a bad year causes you to get an investment from Tencent, right? I mean, I think that Ubisoft would answer that way.
Or to be targeted by Embracer, right? So, I mean, I think we're going to see more, right, as we go into next year and as this generation goes on. So it'll be interesting, but I mainly put the story in there, right, as an indicator of kind of, what's going on in the industry.
All right. And speaking of which, jump into December, our final few news articles, and of course, what we've been talking about this whole time, the FTC sues Microsoft over acquisition of the Activision Blizzard. The Federal Trade Commission, I'll just read real quick here since it's kind of new. I guess we really haven't covered this since it just came out this past week. On Thursday, took the most aggressive action since Linda Khan became chair to rein in the power of big tech, pursuing a lawsuit to block Microsoft acquisition of game developer on the same day. It opened arguments in another case against Meta's purchase of a virtual reality startup. I know, DB, you've been pretty vocal about kind of the, I guess, I don't want to say negativity, but just kind of the...
I mean, I surprise myself in terms of, like... I often do not see myself as a big merger type of person when I look around a variety of industries. But at the same time, I also, am glad that my political science and economics degree comes in handy every once in a while to say, like, this is, I think the challenge here becomes how much of an example the FTC wants to try to set and use this as making that example, where I think there's probably been stronger cases of where this really becomes a monopoly. And again, maybe, as I've said before, maybe this is simply because we grew up in an age where platform holders had some monopoly on games, and that industry maybe has shifted or has shifted. But I think that's where my vocalization comes from in terms of how grounded. Here's a tease for next week's superlative show in terms of the Please Stop game developer award announcements of what is it, our hive of scum and villainy, right? Like, just because your competitor complains about it does not make it an anti-competitive marketplace.
Hamp, any comments on that?
Too many for us to go into tonight.
Right.
I think my one comment about this will be, I think the thing I've commented on before is on this specific topic is, there's been a lot of dialogue that the FTC that this is politically motivated and it's an attempt to put a shot across the bow of big tech, and to which my response is, so what? That's part of how the game is played. But more specifically, I think my primary key point on this is, when you go back and you look at the history and you look at the last 30 years of mergers and acquisitions in this country, they have been rampant, and they accelerated and peaked and spiked in the post 1980s timeframe in a way that's kind of really that's absolutely unprecedented in this country. The size of M&As that were approved in the 90s and the 2000s were absolutely ridiculous in comparison to the past. $130 billion plus, $180 billion plus. And I think the key thing that I personally think we need to key on is whether it's antitrust or anti-competitive, part of the formula here is things that are bad for consumers. And I don't think that there's any way to look at the Time Warner, the Comcast, the Verizon, the AT&T, and come through that and say, post those mergers to say that those mergers were not good, were not bad for consumers. In the wake of those mergers, almost all of those companies had to be taken to court for class action lawsuits, right? And I don't know that there are any consumers that could say they've been pleased over the last decade with their cable bill or their cell phone bill, right? So, I mean, lots of stuff, right, mixed up in here, but I think the key thing is that, and those things have proven to be bad for consumers. And if you look at the metrics, there's definitely been an effort to rein that in before even Lina Khan, right? Broadcom, Qualcomm got approved at like 61 billion, but in general, there's been an effort to kind of cool the heat of the M&A activity and rein it in to more reasonable levels. So, I mean, part of my thing is, DB said, the FTC is trying to establish that there's going to be some adversity, right? And it's not the Wild West. And my feeling is they've already accomplished that by just dropping the lawsuit, right? Like it's fired the shot and it's told companies like you're not just gonna be walked at bat, right, on these things. So it'll be interesting to see how it comes out. I think another key thing that the only other thing I'll mention is, I don't think that the FTC needs to win this case. I think the delay, the way the dates currently fall out, that this deal has to be done by June, and they're talking about not even hearing the case till August, has an impact. I think, talking to another one of my colleagues today is, the fact of the matter is that, if they don't close the deal by June and there's no clause in the contract between Microsoft and Activision to extend it, right, for there to be a loophole because of legal action, that's going to have to be renegotiated. And when you come back to the table to renegotiate, some people change their mind, right? Think about the times that you've put a deal down on a house, right, and it's gotten shaky, and you've gone back to the table a second time. People start thinking about things differently. You don't necessarily come back to the table thinking about, right, closing on that house the exact same way you did the first time around. So, and the optics are going to change, right? A year ago, when this came out, Activision was in a super bad place. They were engaged in litigation with two government agencies, right, over their behavior. Lots of things were bad coming out about Kotick, and Vanguard was doing horrible, right? Come back around to the beginning of this year, they've had the biggest Call of Duty launch ever. Warzone is tearing things up. Overwatch 2, while it had problems, is doing significantly better than the naysayers would have had you believe, right, going into it. So the stocks, things are looking up. Stock price last December, Activision was trading at high 50s, right? 55, 58. After the announcement, stock went up $20, right? To trading at like 77, 78. Stock went up another $14, right, in the months afterwards, up to 85, 88, 90, or in high 80s, right? And now they've cooled back down to the 70s, right? So all those things are going to have, right, an impact on optics and how people feel, right, if they get forced to come back to the table. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see the drama unfold. Sorry.
No, there is like a whole show right here. I mean, I think there's a lot here because you're right. Like it does change the optics. It changes the dynamics. It, potentially those lawsuits that were kind of simmering, how much of that was quiet this year because of the acquisition? How much more comes out afterward? Like, does that, if this falls apart, does some of that come back? I think it also, not only FTC piece, but back to what we talked about in November with the EU and the UK, this emboldens them to keep that pressure on as well. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to, in the long term, come out with a restriction, but dragging them through the mud in the process may have the same effect as a ruling.
Yeah, and one thing that should be tagged on to kind of what you mentioned, right, with the EC and the CMA. Also, remember, all three of those organizations flew over to meet, right, to theoretically kind of harmonize what they were doing with regards to the Microsoft Activision merger, but also, like, in general, more kind of what their joint kind of approach was going to be on handling big tech on a global scale.
Well, I have plenty of questions, but for the sake of time, we're going to keep moving on here. I think you had these last two articles on the Steam Deck.
Yeah, and I'm not going to cover them in detail. Again, it kind of put here thematically because I felt like in a news wrap up of 2022, we had to mention the Steam Deck in there somehow. And so these notes, after all of the extreme warnings to like not get in at a hardware level and really dork with your Steam Deck. Now Sabrent is making NVMe drives that mate with it from a form factor perspective. A problem with the Steam Deck has been NVMe drives. Inexpensive NVMe drives of higher capacity were not available in that form factor. That left the cooling solution intact. And so now Sabrent is catering to that market. And then, one thing that's of note, right, if, however you feel about studios and what your platform preference is, you can't argue with the PlayStation Studio numbers. And however you feel about PlayStation games being on PC, they look, play, and perform amazing, right? And there's been a lot of them this year, and I played a lot of them. And so, and this is a continuing trend here too, that like those games seem to be arriving on PC, ready to run on Steam Deck pretty much out of the box without a huge amount of dorking around with them. So I've been playing Uncharted 4. Lots of people have been talking about playing Spider-Man and Miles Morales on Steam Deck, all of which I think is a good news story. Steam Deck definitely put its thumbprint on 2022, and it continues to roll. It continues to steam roll, one might say.
Hi-yo. Man, I really wish the Steam Deck would have been announced to come out a little bit earlier, because I probably would have got that instead of the PC that I do have now. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it just would have been, obviously it would have been portable, so I've been take it anywhere and vacation and stuff like that. But it is.
I should also mention just on the Steam Deck, right? Another key part of the Steam Deck theme for this year is that all of a sudden it just became explosively available, right? Going into this year and throughout the middle of the year, the big story around the Steam Deck is its incredibly limited availability, and we all put in pre-orders, and different people kept theirs and backed off, and yada yada yada. But now it's like seemingly like generally available, and you just buy it and the thing shows up in a couple weeks. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, I think the Steam Deck is a big news story, and we didn't really have it because it doesn't really hit in one spot, but I think that is a rolling story over the course of the year.
Yep, definitely. All right, I think that is it for our news in review here. Gentlemen, any other comments or anything on the past year that you'd like to talk about? No? All right. So that has been episode number 270, the 2022 News Year in Review. Next week will be part 2 of our end of the year extravaganza, where we'll have our superlative episode, which DB had alluded to earlier, which actually DB will be hosting. And it looks like we'll have all 4 hosts back on for that episode. So please tune in next week. DB, Camp, thank you for joining me tonight. Once again, it's been an excellent episode. It's kind of nice to go back through the year and just kind of see how everything kind of played out and kind of how it's still kind of the same. If you kind of look at it overall, we kind of started with a bang and ended with a bang, kind of with Microsoft in both respects, and just acquisitions and all this other stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see, like I said, next year how all these games, if we get all these games, come out, and just what the news cycle is going to be for the next year. So DB, Hamp, thank you once again for joining me. Thank you everybody for watching, or if you watch in the future. I am TownMaster99. Please join us next week, and we'll see you next time.